I have a little bit of being nosy in my background, so it's kind of fun to come into work and look at people's personal papers, their letters, their photographs. History has always been my favorite subject. I tended to always want to read history books and biographies and things like that throughout my childhood. I read a bio of Martin Luther King Jr. when I was about 7. And when I read that he went to Morehouse, I decided that that was where I was going. I majored in history with a minor in African American studies. I was a Mellon Fellow, so I worked at the Robert W. Woodruff Library in the AUC, and I worked in the archives, and that was my first exposure to what archivists do. We really want people to come in and use the things that we have collected and made accessible for research. Derek Mosley. I'm the archives manager at the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American culture and history. I'm from Lamarck, Texas, which is about 30 minutes from Houston, close to Galveston in Texas. History has always been my favorite subject. I tended to always want to read history books and biographies and things like that throughout my childhood. I spent a lot of time reading. I used to only read bios, so I would read bios of black people, and that was my goal. So I read about Asa Philip Randolph, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Adam Clayton Powell, Fannie Lou Hamer, just anything that was his historical and black is what I wanted to read. No one in my family really is that interested in history, but I was drawn to it. I guess because I didn't like math or science, so history was a natural thing for me. So I used to memorize speeches, and then I would do them during Black History Month, like at school or at church. So I remember, just reading speeches and trying to memorize them, and so I could entertain people. I read a bio of Martin Luther King Jr. when I was about 7. And when I read that he went to Morehouse, I decided that that was where I was going. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know what it really was either. And so that's what I told everyone, that I was going to Morehouse. And I remember being in high school and writing an essay about where I wanted to go to college. And I wrote that I wanted to go to Morehouse. And I spelled it wrong. And my English teacher came back to me and was like, if you really want to go to this school, then you probably should do some research, because you didn't spell it right and you don't know exactly where you're trying to go. But Morehouse was always my goal. I went on a campus tour. I drove from Texas to Atlanta and got a tour and fell in love even more. And so that's where I decided I wanted to go to college. It was the only school that I applied to.
Amazing. What was it about it that when you actually stepped foot on campus, what did that feel like that made you really fall in love?
I think the history of it, as well as walking in the same places that King walked, and then also having a group of black men that I could always count on and be in fellowship with, was something that I was really drawn to. As an only child, it's kind of interesting to always be on your own. So going to Morehouse was a great chance to have brothers. I majored in history with a minor in African American studies. It groomed me because every class was really Afrocentric. So it always focused on the black experience, whether it was U.S. history, whether it was anything outside of just normal black history. They always focused on the black experience, and that's something that I've patterned in my career. It's always working with black collections and black people. I was a Mellon Fellow, and the Mellon Foundation had a recruitment program to get people to go into the library field. So I worked at the Robert W. Woodruff Library in the AUC, and I worked in the archives, and that was my first exposure to what archivists do. And so that was I think it was a 4 or 5 month term, and I worked with the archivist there, Karen Jefferson, who has really become a mentor, And instead of working in the archives, she actually sent me out to really learn and see the different kind of the different kind of archives. So I went to the Georgia Archives, which is in Morrow, and that's the state archives. I went to Emory, I went to Spelman College, and I went to the Atlanta History Center. And I also went to the Koch Archives. I think that was when I first learned that you don't have to be famous to really have a archives, and that it's really that every place focuses on something different, and it is important to really tell a true story of people, whether their color, whether their economic status. It's always about collecting to make sure that history is present. It benefits everyone. Everyone can be a researcher, and it's really up to the person to really seek out that information. So I really found out that it's just more than just dead white people. It's it really is about the everyday person. I went to Simmons College in Boston, and that's where I got my master's in archives management. Going to Boston was a big choice because I wanted to work with people as well as with history, and so going into the archives was something that I learned that I really wanted to really go into. When I first went to Morehouse, I wanted to actually be a teacher. So as a history major, I was focusing on going and teaching high school history. That was my goal. But as I went through college, I really did decide to do something different. And so working in the archives is something that was really drawn to me. And I actually had a brother at Morehouse who went to Simmons first. And so he went to Simmons, and he kind of he really inspired me to go there. At the time, they had the best archives program. I learned a lot about processing and working with records, paper and photos, and even some digital aspects. So I was really given that hands-on experience to really work with archives. So after school, actually my last year there, I started searching for jobs. I wanted to be fully employed by the time I graduated. So I sent out apps everywhere. And I landed a job in Lafayette, Louisiana, which was about 45 minutes from Baton Rouge. And I worked at the University of Louisiana, and I worked in the Ernest Gaines Center. Ernest Gaines is a black writer. He has written 9 novels, and his most famous works are A Lesson Before Dying and the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. And so I worked with his personal papers and his writings, his photographs, and his books. And so that was what I was in charge of for about almost 3 years. My work entails working with donors. So when people are willing to give their papers or their documents to us, I work with them to set up our deed of gift, as well as pick up the different papers and collections. I answer reference questions. I work with staff to process collections. Each day is something different. We also do exhibits here and different outreach things. And also, I may also have classes that come, and so I'll show them our different collections and what types of research can be done here. Without researchers, there wouldn't be a point of archives. We really want people to come in and use the things that we have collected and made accessible for research. We rely heavily on people coming in and using our collections. No matter how old you are, you should always think about your personal papers and what type of legacy you will leave. Not everyone's papers ends up in our archives, but what type of legacy can you leave for your family and future generations. It's really important to have some type of trail of papers or photographs or something that you can look back on and really see and understand. And one of my favorite things is to look at funeral programs. That has much of the history of Black people, and it is that lasting legacy of who or what someone did. So make sure you take care of your own things, and if you so think about it, give them to an archives. So one of the things that I really enjoy about this field is being able to read other people's business. So I have a little bit of being nosy in my background. So it's kind of fun to come into work and look at people's personal papers, their letters, their photographs. It's very interesting because you never know what is going to be in a box. I have found hair, locks of hair. I found a purse. I found all types of little trinkets that people have saved, and they end up in our archives. And so it's those little things that really make working in that makes working in the archive special.